Probably one of the most popular questions that I get asked is really the difference between real-time internet leads and aged internet leads. What makes them different? Why potentially I should invest in one over the other? Should I invest in both? Or is there one particular kind of technique or source of leads that I should choose over the other? So I want to take you through really breaking down these two scenarios and talking about when it's appropriate to use the different types of techniques. And really, if given the budget, I would always encourage sort of a blending of these techniques for sure. But if you don't have the budget, which a lot of you, as you start out, maybe there's some constraints there. And so, as is always the case, it's not really a one better than the other scenario. It's really a trade-off of sweat equity, if you will. So really, real-time leads are going to require a certain type of process. Age leads is going to require a different type of process. Although this probably isn't as wide a gap as you would suspect, there is some different levels of effort that's required to close age leads versus real-time leads. But a lot of those gaps can be covered or closed in with systems, right? And automation, technology, and those sorts of things. So we're going to kind of talk through all those things. The fundamental first thing that's important is just really understanding the difference between the two. And really, for the most part, the difference between the two is quite simple. The real-time internet leads are internet leads that are generated with a whole myriad of marketing, online digital marketing techniques to actually create an inquiry, a web form. Let's get super simple with our language, to create a actual web form fill from a consumer that's interested in rates, mortgage rates, insurance rates, and wants some form of quote, or a phone call. Those are becoming more and more popular. We're actually transferring live calls. So a real-time internet lead is we've simply used those techniques in order to produce that inquiry, and we're delivering that to you in real time, or as close to real time as possible, based on the technology that you're using to actually get the leads, right? So that's a real-time internet lead. Aged internet leads is a category of leads that takes just a tiny bit of explanation, and this isn't perfect. Not all age leads providers are going to kind of provide everything within these parameters, but I'm going to give you kind of a general understanding of what is happening, right? So real-time lead providers and lead aggregators take in all of these leads, and by their contract with their customer, they're allowed to sell that lead multiple times, and in order to monetize their marketing expenses, right? In order to make a profit, so they can continue to generate leads. So depending on what those agreements are, they can be allowed to sell that 3, 4, 5 times, whatever that number is. In the internet lead business, we call those legs. So those are legs of the lead. Oftentimes, because we're constantly in this situation where we're trying to balance the amount of demand that we're generating, so the actual amount of leads, and then also trying to create a network of lead buyers that can pull those leads off and service them, right? And so those lead buyers have a whole bunch of again, what we call filters, and you're probably familiar with that because you apply filters when you're buying leads. And so those lead buyers have just certain parameters in which they can offer a product, right? There are certain product types, there may be loan amounts, there may be types of insurance, there are geographic constrictions. So there's all of these constraints over here that only allows them to take certain leads. And so we're always in this as a real-time lead provider, we're always in this quandary of balancing supply and demand, right? The amount of leads that we're actually generating and trying to match them up to demand as best as possible. But invariably, there's a whole bunch of leads that are built into the supply inventory that simply don't get serviced, right? They don't get actually all the legs sold, or maybe they don't get serviced at all because they're maybe small loan amounts, or they're in a geography that just doesn't have a lot of people and demand in them. And so as a result, there are leads that just sit in the database, so to speak, and age. And then that's what creates the age lead market. So there's a set of internet lead brokers that can then take those age leads and package them in an efficient way. The cost is significantly less, right? Because they're perceived to be less valuable. And so that's kind of what creates that age lead market. So really a real-time internet lead and an aged internet lead are essentially exactly the same, the same level of quality. The only thing that's different is the age. And so with the age, there are some things that happen, and we've talked about those on some other videos, right? People change their emails, people change their phone numbers. They actually, their product need has been satisfied through that time period. So there's a lot of things that can happen in that, but we don't want to focus too much on this, so we don't make this video too long. But that's really the difference between the two. So when we're considering kind of that decision, the decision between real-time internet leads and aged internet leads, there's a couple things that are playing into that decision process, right? One that is often the case that leads us to the age lead is we just look at the price difference, right? And you're wondering, how do I afford enough leads to actually meet my monthly sales goal, right? I have a goal. I know I'm only going to be able to convert X percentage, and oftentimes I need a lot of leads to hit that goal. And so oftentimes we are led into the age lead scenario because they're just simply a lot cheaper. So that's one decision point, is just kind of your budget constraints. The other thing that we're often considering is, like, when do you need to hit that sales goal? Are you actually building your database for the long-term goal? Or are you building that database because you need to actually close leads this month, right? And so that goes to the question of sales readiness. And again, this is one of those situations where oftentimes maybe the age leads, even though they're cheaper, might actually be in a more ready state for the sale. This is particularly true right now in the mortgage purchase market. So oftentimes people are making inquiries to purchase homes far in advance of when they're actually ready to take some actions. Some of the people that I've talked to, this could be up to 6 months. So in some senses, potentially, if the lead is handled properly and you have a good system, that age lead that's maybe 30, 60 days might actually be closer to sales ready than the real-time lead that you got within moments. Again, that changes with markets. Auto insurance is probably a different game because the urgency is usually probably right now there, so maybe real-time leads are a little bit better. But at the same time, in the insurance market, you're kind of always in the insurance market. There's always an opportunity for maybe you get a little bit better rate, or maybe your credit's improved over the last couple months or whatever. So you, even though you may have actually satisfied your product need, you actually may be in a situation to save a little bit more money 60 days down the line. So sales readiness plays into that decision. And then, of course, in the case of both real-time and age lead, another decision point is really understanding that none of these things are exclusive, right? And so if you buy an age lead, you certainly have competitors. If you buy a real-time lead, you have competitors too. And really, kind of the intensity on that competition is really the variable between the two of those. But these are kind of the three things that you should be thinking about as you're making the decision for any type of internet lead, but definitely when you're making the decision between real-time and age. So now let's kind of go through a couple of problems with real-time leads, because I think a lot of times people think that real-time leads are without some of the challenges that we already kind of inherently know are baked into the age lead sort of paradigm. So I kind of want to talk about these on level footings, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on some of the problems with real-time leads. So first and foremost, real-time leads are just simply expensive, right? There is a high level of value placed on the fact that that inquiry was just received. So again, numbers are all over the place depending on the vertical that you're approaching, but really the kind of the incremental difference, if you will, is it's about 10 times as expensive, sometimes even greater than that, maybe 20 times as expensive, depending on the industry that you're doing, of that lead versus an age lead. So there's a big price differential. And again, depending on your situation, it may become an easy decision, the ability to pay the difference between the two. Of course, conversion rate plays into this, right? So theoretically, if you're paying more for that lead, you should get a higher conversion rate, and as a result, that ROI sort of math works out. But when you really drive down that cost to be so cheap, a very low conversion rate sometimes can more than satisfy the ROI requirement. So it's definitely a consideration. I talked about this a little bit. Oftentimes, this is a misconception. The real-time lead is not necessarily 100% sales ready, right? So there are often time that needs to kind of elapse. Maybe there are questions that need to be answered. Maybe there are circumstances that need to be resolved in that individual situation. So there's a lot of reasons to believe that even though the real-time doesn't necessarily go one-for-one as a correlation to being sales ready. In this moment in time of real-time leads, the intensity of the competition is incredible. And so if you've ever called on real-time leads, you'll know that probably your number one top objection that you're overcoming is, I'm already working with someone. No matter how fast you are, you wonder how this happens, but there are some lightning fast systems out there and processes that will just invariably put you behind a competitor. Even just simply the fact that oftentimes when a consumer goes into the market, and this is a real problem with real-time leads often as well, and kind of creating even more intensity, they will actually apply and submit inquiries at multiple websites. And this is what usually gets customers really upset, and they don't even understand that they're doing it to themselves. So they're applying for 3 or 4 different forms. Each of those have the ability to be sold 4 or 5 times. So then just by filling out 3 of those forms, instead of getting 5 calls, you just immediately introduced 15 highly intensive salespeople going to get ready to bang your phone, right? And so sometimes that intensity from competition is really a negative component of real-time leads. So ultimately, what do we think the solution is? Again, we talk about Age Leads. We are Age Lead Store, and so we'll kind of admit our bias, but we think that in a lot of ways, Age Leads can be just as compelling a solution as real-time leads, especially if you've got a constrained budget. It's a great place to start. It's a great place to begin to build out a very large database and book of business that can continue with some quality marketing automation, drip email campaigns, call campaigns. By putting these systems in place, you can create a very sustainable, consistent flow of new sales each and every month by building that really large database. Again, starting with Age Leads, maybe you introduce real-time leads later, but there's a lot of reasons that we think Age Leads continue to be a very, very compelling first place to start. I hope you enjoy this.
I don't have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
Hope that you enjoyed that. We would encourage you to subscribe to our channel and look forward to seeing you next time.